Does every moral dilemma have a correct answer? You've heard them, you've asked them, you've been asked them. Maybe you've even found yourself in the unfortunate position of being trapped in a moral dilemma. But an interesting thing about moral dilemmas is that they can often be an indicator of how someone sees or understands the world around them. And to go even further than that, I think oftentimes moral dilemmas can even be something that gives us an insight into the world and the systems that we've set up for ourselves. So, let's dig into that. Hi folks, I'm Paul, and this is my take. The most famous moral dilemma is probably the trolley problem. You know how it goes. A trolley is barreling down the tracks, and the course it is currently on will result in the death of 5 innocent people, unless you intervene. Your intervention requires you to pull a lever that diverts the trolley onto a different track, and this one has 1 innocent person standing on it. So, what do? Is your choice to intervene, even as a decision to save 5 innocent people, is that considered murder because you actively participated in killing 1 innocent person? Is your choice to remain unassociated with this event morally square if you had the opportunity to save 5 men, but decided not to? I don't think there's a wrong answer. It's a horrible situation to be put into. But depending on what someone says they would do in this hypothetical, has the potential to reveal their philosophical beliefs, even if they don't know they hold them. I personally probably wouldn't be able to pull the lever. I don't know if I could live with myself knowing I made a decision to actively, affirmatively end an innocent man's life for whatever reason. I would feel immense guilt by playing God like that. But I also know I would probably be eaten up by the idea that I didn't save 5 innocent men because of this maybe selfish desire to remain morally pure. I don't measure the value of goodness in the world quantitatively. I'm not a utilitarian when it comes to the concept of life and the decisions we make to preserve life. But I have a pretty good understanding of the position and the logic of those who do. And this dilemma becomes more interesting when you add more modifications and variables to it, because it changes the calculus. What if instead of pulling a lever, you had to push a fat guy onto the tracks? What if it was a school kid? What if it was a baby? What about 3 babies? What about your mom? Most people's answers to this dilemma probably change with those modifications. And I like this hypothetical because it doesn't change my opinion of the people who answer it in a way that's different from my own answer. One, because it's a situation that most of us are never going to find ourselves in, but also because it helps me better understand their perspective. It helps me better understand how to communicate with them. But a few weeks ago, a new dilemma hypothetical question took the internet by storm. The red button, blue button dilemma. And it goes like this. Everyone is presented with a secret vote. Press the blue button, and everyone survives only if over 50% of everyone else voting also presses the same blue button. Press the red button, and it simply guarantees your survival, no matter what. Even if less than 50% of people press the red button, you still survive. So, which button do you press? Now, similarly to the trolley problem, this dilemma has no wrong answers, but it does have a right one. And that answer is, it depends. If this scenario is limited to people in my community, including children, all voting, then I'm probably going to have to press the blue button, because children don't know any better. They might be pressing that button because blue is their favorite color. They don't have the cognitive capacity to understand that by pressing the blue button, they're putting their life at risk. So in this scenario, pressing the blue button is probably the most morally correct decision. But if this scenario is limited to everyone in my community whom I love, we're all voting with the exclusion of children, well then I'm pressing the red button. Because the adults in my circle are intelligent enough to know that if they press the blue button, not only are they putting their life at risk, but also the lives of everyone else who would then have to press the same blue button in order to save them from their own stupid decision. In this situation, pressing the blue button is the morally incorrect decision. And as this discussion about the button dilemma swirled, a lot of people immediately noticed patterns of thought between red button pressers and blue button pressers, and it quickly became a proxy for their politics at large, with those red and blue colors being obvious indicators. I saw a lot of moralizing and accusations of selfishness or stupidity, but under all of this laid a discussion that I didn't see a whole lot of people having, and that's either because we're unaware of this discussion or we're maybe too afraid to wade into it. So I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to wade into it. This hypothetical dilemma exposes a really big problem. Now, it's something I've been aware of for a long time, but hadn't had the opportunity to see it play out in such a clear way with the discussion about this hypothetical. It is a major flaw in our democratic system, and that is our system is wide open to people who don't have the cognitive ability to make intelligent, responsible choices. i.e., universal suffrage as we have it now is unwise. And in a prudent society, only a fraction of the people who are eligible to vote would actually be voting. One of the main brain exercises of this dilemma is to see who has the ability to understand the consequences of their actions and who doesn't. If 50% of people or more press the blue button, then everybody is fine. But if everyone understands that by pressing the red button, it guarantees their personal safety and requires nobody else to put themselves in a situation where they would be risking their own life, well, then there's no logical reason for anyone to ever press the blue button. To mix dilemmas, the trolley is rolling down the tracks and nobody is on the track, unless you press the blue button, and then you teleport onto the track. Now, you are in mortal danger unless 50% of everybody else with red and blue buttons makes the same decision you made to get onto the track, at which point there would be enough people to somehow stop the trolley. The other decision you could have made was not getting on the tracks at all to begin with. You press the red button and ensure your own safety and also the safety of everyone else by not putting them in a position where they would also have to get down there and save you from the decision that you made. A better system would be one in which people who press the blue button never actually have access to the buttons to begin with. They don't have access to the vote. Now, an obvious counter-argument to my position would be that voting isn't a test of intelligence. It's an expression of equal moral worth. And the moment you start deciding who is and isn't smart enough to participate, well, then you open the door to a lot of potential abuse. And to go even further, intelligence doesn't even guarantee good decision making. Plenty of highly educated, smart, capable people make stupid decisions all the time. So the idea that you can cleanly separate qualified individuals from unqualified ones, it starts to fall apart pretty quickly when you use intelligence as the only metric. And I understand that opposition because it's a valid concern, but it doesn't fully address the underlying issue. The question isn't whether every individual makes perfect decisions. The question is whether or not a system should ignore clear and obvious patterns of decision-making that create avoidable risk for both the decision-maker and the person around them. We already accept limitations on decision-making in other areas and policies. Children aren't allowed to vote, sign contracts, or make certain medical decisions. And it's not because they lack moral worth, it's because they lack the cognitive capacity to understand the consequences of those decisions. And our society's choice to limit their decision-making in those areas is done out of care and protection for them, not abuse of them. A problem I'm seeing is that we treat adulthood as a sole guarantor of an individual's capacity for intelligent decision-making when that just isn't the case. It's kind of like the argument we just covered about intelligence being the sole guarantor of someone's ability to make smart decisions. It's not, but I would argue that it's probably more indicative than age. And unlike a lot of other areas of life, voting has large-scale consequences that affect everyone, not just the people making the decision. And this isn't even a left-wing, right-wing, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican kind of thing. It's a prudent, imprudent thing. To return to the dilemma, if everyone understands the consequences of each choice, then the red button is the only option that doesn't introduce unnecessary risk to yourself and everyone else. Pressing blue actually creates a problem that didn't previously exist. And this is done for no reason whatsoever. The only scenario where pressing the blue button makes any kind of sense is if you believe a significant number of people who are participating in this vote don't understand the risk that choice poses, or they simply ignore it. In other words, the moral choice to press the blue button depends entirely on the expectation that people will make uninformed and unintelligent decisions. And that's where this stops becoming a thought experiment and starts looking like a real-world problem, particularly when it comes to democratic systems. If a system depends on people making consistent, rational decisions, but also allows participation from people who are unable or unwilling to understand those decisions, well then that system is inherently unstable. And to be clear, a hypothetical like the red button, blue button dilemma isn't the same as a real-world decision-making scenario. People can answer hypotheticals carelessly or treat it as a game or not understand the question. So I'm not pointing to this hypothetical and saying, hey, everyone who said blue in this hypothetical shouldn't be allowed to vote. That would be dumb. But I guess the whole point behind this video is to maybe introduce you to the idea that it might actually be immoral to put self-destructive people in positions where they make self-destructive decisions. And that's particularly relevant when it comes to the field of voting. We frequently hear democracy spoken about in lofty and admirable terms, but I've come to the realization that it's actually a pretty dangerous and broken form of governance. In any sense, even if probably 80% of the button discourse was unproductive, I still found the button dilemma to be really interesting and insightful. A lot of the discussion came down to the idea of caring for your fellow man, which is great. I think we should talk about that all the time. Blue button pressers care about their fellow man by making a similar choice as their fellow man in order to save him from his bad choice. And red button pressers care about their fellow man by not putting him in a situation where he would be able to make that bad decision. Anyway, that's all I've got for today, but what do you think? Is my perspective on the button dilemma completely fleshed out? What might I be missing? Do you have any other kind of dilemma question that you'd like to share? Whatever your thoughts, please add them to the comments below. I always enjoy interacting with y'all. As always, if you enjoy my content and want to see more, I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I will see y'all next time.